March 6, 1944. 23,000 feet over Augsburg, Germany. The tail section of the B-17 Hell's Fury vibrated with engine roar and freezing wind. Through the plexiglass bubble, Staff Sergeant Michael Mad Mike Donovan counted silhouettes against the winter sky. 12 Messerschmitt Bf-109s, peeling off from their formation, banking toward his aircraft in a coordinated death spiral. The manual was clear. Hold fire until fighters reach 400 yards. Conserve ammunition. Maintain defensive posture. Training was explicit. 1 controlled burst per target. Protect the aircraft. Stay alive. Common sense screamed, 12 against 1. You're already dead. Donovan's gloved hands tightened around the twin .50 caliber grips. His breath fogged inside the oxygen mask. Outside, the lead Bf-109 was still 1,200 yards out, 3 times beyond effective range. And he opened fire anyway. 4 minutes later, 12 German fighters tumbled from the sky in smoke and flame. Hell's Fury sustained 0 critical damage. 9 American crewmen flew home breathing, and every tail gunner in the 8th Air Force learned a word their instructors never taught them. This is the story of the man who turned suicide into doctrine. How a street fighter from South Boston rewrote the rules of aerial warfare by doing everything wrong. How the most dangerous seat on a B-17, a position with a 38% death rate, became the deadliest weapon in Allied airspace. How desperation didn't just save 1 crew, it saved 3,000 lives. Michael Donovan didn't learn to fight in the Army Air Forces. He learned on the cobblestone streets of South Boston, where survival wasn't about following rules. It was about breaking noses before yours got broken. His father, Patrick Donovan, worked 16-hour shifts on the Boston docks. Shoulders like bridge cables, hands that could bend iron. Never threw the first punch in his life, never backed down from the second. His older brother, Tommy, fought Golden Gloves at the Southie Athletic Club. Taught Mike the fundamentals when he was 9 years old. Hit first, hit hard, hit where it counts. Waiting gets you hurt, Mikey. Action keeps you breathing. By 17, Donovan had been in 32 street fights, won 28, lost 4, everyone because he hesitated, because he gave the other guy time to think, time to plan, time to strike. The lesson burned itself into his DNA. Initiative is survival. Defense is just slow-motion death. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Donovan was 19, welding pipes at the Charlestown Navy Yard when the news broke over the radio. He didn't wait for the announcement to finish. He walked straight to the Army recruiting station on Tremont Street and enlisted before sunset. They wanted him for ground crew, maintenance, logistics, supply chains. Safe positions. Positions where aggressive kids from Southie couldn't get themselves killed. Donovan insisted on gunnery school. The chief instructor at Laredo Army Airfield, Master Sergeant Vincent Kowalski, pulled him aside after the 3rd day of training. "You're too aggressive, Donovan, too reckless. You expose yourself to return fire. You waste ammunition on targets outside your effective envelope. You're going to get your crew killed if you don't learn discipline." Donovan looked him dead in the eye, and his response became legend in every gunnery school from Texas to England. "Dead gunners don't shoot back, Sergeant. Live ones do." He graduated 3rd in his class of 47. Not because of accuracy, Donovan's groupings were average. He graduated for speed. He could acquire targets, calculate deflection angles, and open fire faster than anyone the Air Forces had trained. His secret wasn't superior reflexes, it was philosophy. While other gunners waited for enemy fighters to enter their firing zone, the approved 400-yard envelope, Donovan hunted them at 800, 1,000, even 1,200 yards out. Before they organized, before they committed, before they became lethal. He didn't defend the aircraft, he attacked the sky. March 1944, RAF Framlingham, England, the 391st Bombardment Group. The B-17 Hell's Fury already had a reputation before Donovan ever touched her guns. 3 combat missions over Germany, 2 near-catastrophic encounters with Luftwaffe fighter swarms. The previous tail gunner, Sergeant Eddie Morrison from Tulsa, Oklahoma, survived both attacks but requested immediate transfer after the 3rd mission. Morrison told the crew chief, Staff Sergeant Lou Abrams, in a voice that still shook, "That position's cursed, Lou. The math don't lie. Next man who sits back there dies back there." The tail gun position carried a 38% casualty rate across the 8th Air Force, highest on the aircraft, exposed, isolated, first target for enemy fighters attacking from behind. The Germans knew it. The Americans knew it. Everyone knew it. When the transfer posting went up on the barracks board, most gunners looked at it like a death warrant. Donovan volunteered within the hour. Captain James Whitmore, pilot of Hell's Fury, 26 years old, Princeton graduate, 12 combat missions under his belt, interviewed Donovan personally in the operations shack. He slid a folder across the table. Casualty statistics, tail gunner life expectancy charts, probability curves that all bent toward the grave. "You know the numbers?" Whitmore asked. "Tail gunner position. 38% don't finish their tour. That's not wounded. That's dead or missing." Donovan didn't blink. "Then I've got 62% odds, sir. I'll take them." "Why?" "Because I don't wait for them to shoot me." Donovan leaned forward. "I shoot first." Whitmore studied him for 10 seconds. Then he smiled, not with humor, but with the grim recognition of someone who understood calculated insanity. "You're out of your mind, Sergeant." "Yes, sir. You'll fit right in." March 2nd, 1944. First mission. Target: ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt, deep in German industrial heartland. Expected resistance: moderate to heavy. Actual resistance: 23 BF-109s and FW-190s. Donovan climbed into the tail section at 0530 hours, strapped himself into the seat, checked the twin .50 caliber Brownings, 2,500 rounds of linked ammunition, pulled on his heated gloves, his oxygen mask, his dark leather helmet with integrated headphones. Through the plexiglass, the English countryside disappeared beneath them as Hell's Fury climbed to formation altitude. At 11:47 hours over the German border, the waist gunner's voice crackled through the intercom. "Fighters! Or 7 o'clock high!" Donovan swiveled the guns, spotted them immediately. 4 BF-109s, 1,500 yards out, beginning their dive approach toward the bomber formation's vulnerable rear quarter. Standard doctrine: wait until they close to 400 yards, then fire controlled 3-second bursts. Donovan opened fire at 900 yards. Tracers arced across the sky, bright phosphorescent lines stitching through empty air. The lead BF-109 didn't explode, didn't catch fire, didn't even take visible damage, but it broke formation. The pilot flinched, jerked his stick, peeled away from his wingman. The coordinated attack collapsed into chaos. One fighter overshot, another dove too steep. The 4th aborted entirely, banking hard to escape the unexpected wall of lead. Donovan tracked the scattered formation. Fired another burst at 700 yards, still outside effective range, still wasting ammunition by every manual the Army Air Forces published. But the fighters didn't regroup. They didn't press the attack. They circled wide, wary, looking for easier prey. Hell's Fury flew home untouched. That night, in the debriefing room, the intelligence officer, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, reviewed Donovan's ammunition expenditure report. "You fired 640 rounds, Sergeant. You scored 1 confirmed kill and 2 probables. That's exceptionally high ammunition use for 3 targets." "Yes, sir." "The manual recommends—" Captain Whitmore cut him off. "The manual recommends we lose 30% of our bombers every mission, Lieutenant. Donovan's method kept my aircraft operational. I'll take his waste over their efficiency." Donovan didn't smile, but he understood something the manual writers didn't. The math wasn't about bullets per kill. It was about bullets per survival. One burst at 800 yards cost 20 rounds, but it forced a fighter to break attack pattern, disrupted timing, shattered the psychological advantage that turned bomber formations into killing zones. 20 rounds to save 9 lives and 65,000 pounds of aircraft? The math wasn't wasteful, it was genius. The Donovan family didn't own much, but they owned their corner of South Boston. Patrick Donovan worked the Atlantic Avenue docks, loading cargo, breaking ice off steel cables in January, coming home with hands that looked like they'd been carved from the same granite as the harbor walls. He never complained, never missed a shift, never threw the first punch, but God help the man who threw the second. Tommy Donovan, Michael's older brother by 4 years, fought at the Southie Athletic Club every Friday night. Golden gloves, middleweight. Fast hands, iron chin, the kind of fighter who made crowds forget they were watching amateurs. He trained Mike in the basement of their triple-decker on K Street, teaching him footwork on concrete floors, showing him how to read a man's shoulders before his fists moved. "You hesitate, you lose," Tommy said. You're wrapping Mike's hands before a sparring session when Mike was 14. Don't wait for him to commit. Don't wait to see what he's planning. You see an opening, you take it. Action keeps you breathing, Mikey. Waiting just gets you hurt. Mike took that lesson to the streets. By 17, he'd been in 32 fights, 28 wins, 4 losses, every one of them because he waited too long, gave his opponent time to set up, time to think, time to move first. The last loss happened outside Malloy's Tavern on a frozen February night in 1941. Kid named Danny Sullivan, dock worker's son like Mike, caught him with a right cross that put him on his back in a snowbank. Mike remembered staring at the stars, tasting blood, thinking about the 2 seconds he'd wasted trying to figure out Sullivan's strategy instead of breaking his nose. But he never made that mistake again. December 7th, 1941, changed everything. Mike was welding pipes at Charlestown Navy Yard when someone killed the radio mid-song and announced the attack on Pearl Harbor. He didn't wait for details, didn't wait for his shift to end. He walked straight off the job site, took the streetcar to the Army recruiting station on Tremont Street, and signed the enlistment papers before most of America even processed what war meant. The recruiter wanted him for ground crew, maintenance, supply, safe positions where aggressive kids from Southie couldn't get themselves killed trying to be heroes. Mike insisted on gunnery school, argued until they relented, got his orders to Laredo Army Airfield, Texas 3 weeks later. Master Sergeant Vincent Kowalski ran the gunnery program like he was training monks, not warriors. Discipline, patience, controlled fire, ammunition conservation. Wait for targets to enter the 400-yard envelope. 3-second bursts, defensive posture. Mike violated every principle within 48 hours. On the 3rd day of training, Kowalski pulled him aside after Mike emptied half a belt at a target drone still 800 yards out. "You're too aggressive, Donovan. Too reckless. You're exposing yourself to return fire. You're wasting ammunition on targets you can't hit. You keep this up, you'll get your crew killed." Mike looked at him without blinking. "Dead gunners don't shoot back, Sergeant. Live ones do." The phrase spread through Laredo like a virus. By graduation, half the class was repeating it. Mike finished 3rd out of 47. Not for accuracy, but for speed. He could acquire targets, calculate deflection, and open fire faster than anyone in the program. While other gunners waited for the enemy to enter their kill zone, Mike hunted them before they got there. He didn't defend positions. He attacked vectors. March 1944, England, RAF, Framlingham, the 391st Bombardment Group. The B-17 Hell's Fury sat on the hard stand like a bad omen. Olive drab paint, nose art of a burning demon. 3 missions deep, 2 near-catastrophic fighter encounters, and 1 empty tailgun position that nobody wanted to touch. Sergeant Eddie Morrison, the previous tail gunner, had survived both attacks through what he called divine intervention and pure luck. After the 3rd mission, He requested immediate transfer, told the crew chief the position was cursed, told anyone who'd listen that the next man to sit back there wouldn't come home. And the posting went up on the barracks board. Tail gunner needed, Hell's Fury, immediate assignment. Most gunners looked at it the way you'd look at a cancer diagnosis. Mike volunteered within the hour. Captain James Whitmore interviewed him in the operations shack. 26 years old, Princeton graduate, quiet competence that came from flying 12 missions and watching friends die. He slid a folder across the table. Casualty statistics, probability curves, tail gunner mortality rates that all pointed the same direction. 38% casualty rate, Whitmore said. Highest position on the aircraft. First target for fighters attacking from behind. You understand what you're volunteering for? 62% survival odds, Mike replied. Marcy, I'll take them. Why? Because I don't wait for them to shoot me. Mike leaned forward. I shoot first. Whitmore studied him, then smiled, not with humor, but with recognition. You're insane, Sergeant. Yes, sir. You'll fit right in. 2 days later, Mike flew his first mission with Hell's Fury. Target, Schweinfurt ball-bearing factories. Expected resistance, heavy. Actual resistance, heavier. At 11:47 hours, crossing into German airspace, the waist gunner's voice cracked through the intercom. Fighters, 7 o'clock high. Mike swiveled the twin .50 calibers, 4 BF-109s, maybe 1,200 yards out, beginning their attack dive. Standard doctrine said wait until they closed to 400 yards. Wait until you could see rivets. Wait until they were committed. Mike opened fire at 900 yards. Tracers arced across empty sky. Bright phosphorescent threads that shouldn't have hit anything, shouldn't have done anything except waste ammunition and announce his position. But the lead BF-109 flinched. Not damage, not destruction, just hesitation. The pilot jerked his stick, broke formation, threw off the timing of the coordinated attack. His wingman overcompensated. The third fighter dove too steep. The fourth aborted entirely. Mike fired again at 700 yards, still outside effective range, still wasting bullets by every manual the Air Force published. The fighters scattered, circled wide, found easier prey. Hell's Fury flew home untouched. That night, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, intelligence officer, reviewed Mike's ammunition expenditure. 640 rounds, Sergeant. 1 confirmed kill, 2 probables. As that's exceptionally high usage. Yes, sir. The manual recommends... Whitmore cut him off. The manual recommends we lose 30% of our bombers every mission. Donovan kept my aircraft operational. His waste beats their efficiency. Mike didn't smile. But he understood something the manual writers never would. The math wasn't bullets per kill. It was bullets per survival. 1 burst at 800 yards cost 20 rounds. But it forced a fighter to break attack, disrupted timing, shattered the psychological edge that turned coordinated assaults into massacres. 20 rounds to save 9 lives and 65,000 pounds of aircraft wasn't wasteful. It was economics. Mike proved it again on March 4th. Target, marshalling yards outside Berlin. 18 FW-190s attacked the formation. Mike fired 840 rounds, twice what any other tail gunner expended. I scored 2 kills, but more importantly, forced 11 fighters to abort their runs before reaching effective range. The aircraft behind Hell's Fury, a B-17 called Sweet Caroline, took 3 direct hits because their tail gunner waited for the manual's approved distance. 7 crewmen died. Mike's crew went home intact. He wrote the equation in his notebook that night. 20 rounds times aggressive fire equals 9 lives saved. 10 rounds times defensive fire equals 7 lives lost. Math doesn't lie. But it was March 5th when Mike discovered something even more valuable than early engagement. He discovered the wingman. The mission brief warned of concentrated fighter resistance over Augsburg. The Luftwaffe was pooling resources, throwing everything at the bomber streams. Standard attacks involved 3-ship formations, a lead fighter flanked by 2 wingmen. And the lead drew defensive fire while the wingmen positioned for the kill. Every manual, every training protocol, every tactical doctrine said the same thing. Target the lead aircraft. Eliminate the formation commander. Break the attack's head. Mike did the opposite. When the first 3-ship element closed on Hell's Fury, Mike ignored the lead BF-109. Ignored the fighter diving straight at his guns. Instead, he swiveled 15 degrees right and opened fire on the wingman. The second fighter, the one assuming he was safe, the one committed to his attack vector because his leader was supposed to absorb the defensive fire. Mike put 30 rounds into the wingman's engine cowling at 600 yards. The BF-109 erupted in black smoke, rolled inverted, fell away. But more importantly, the lead fighter panicked. Without his wingman, without the coordinated timing, without the psychological safety of formation discipline, the lead pilot lost his nerve. He broke off at 300 yards well before reaching his firing solution. The third fighter, the other wingman, followed him. 3-ship element. 0 damage to Hell's Fury. Mike did it again 10 minutes later. Targeted the wingman. Destroyed the psychological architecture of the formation. Watched the lead fighter abort, because nobody fights well when they're suddenly alone. That night, Whitmore asked him the question everyone was thinking. Why the wingman? Why not the lead? Mike's answer was pure South Boston logic. You don't fight the guy throwing punches. You fight the guy holding his coat. Whitmore blinked. What? Street fights, sir. You ever notice how guys always bring backup? One guy throws punches. Oh, his buddy stands behind him holding his jacket, making sure nobody jumps in. You go after the puncher, the fight lasts forever. But you drop the guy holding the coat? The puncher realizes he's alone, realizes his buddy can't save him, realizes he might actually lose. Mike gestured to the mission map. Lead fighter's the puncher. Wingmen are holding his coat. You kill the wingman, you kill his confidence. Whitmore stared at him, then laughed. The kind of laughter that comes from recognizing genius hiding inside insanity. You just rewrote tactical doctrine using bar fight logic. Yes, sir. I'm putting this in my report. Yes, sir. And Donovan? Sir, tomorrow's mission is Augsburg. We're expecting 2,000 fighters, maybe more. Mike checked his guns, loaded fresh ammunition belts, and ran his hands over the cold steel of the twin .50 calibers. Then I'll need more coats to drop, sir. The briefing room at RAF Framlingham smelled like coffee, cigarette smoke, and fear. March 6th, 1944, 0400 hours. Every crew assigned to the Augsburg mission sat in folding chairs while Major Richards pointed at the wall map with a wooden pointer that trembled slightly in his hand. Augsburg Industrial Complex, Richards said. Ball bearings, machine tools, diesel engines, high-value target, also high-value defense. He tapped a red circle on the map. Intelligence estimates between 2,000 and 2,500 Luftwaffe fighters concentrated in this sector. They know we're coming. They've been pulling aircraft from the Eastern Front for 3 days. Someone in the back whispered, Jesus Christ. Richards ignored it. Oh, we'll have P-51 escort to the German border. After that, you're on your own until the rally point. Expected losses. He paused. 30 to 40%. The room went silent. 30 to 40% meant 12 to 16 bombers wouldn't come home. That was 120 to 160 men dead, missing, or captured. The math sat in everyone's throat like broken glass. After the briefing, Whitmore pulled Mike aside in the operations shack. The captain looked like he hadn't slept in days, probably because he hadn't. I need to ask you something, Whitmore said, and I need an honest answer. Yes, sir. Your tactics, the aggressive fire, the wingman targeting, all of it. Whitmore lit a cigarette with shaking hands. It works for normal resistance. 4 fighters, 8 fighters, maybe 12. But tomorrow we're looking at swarms. 40, 50 aircraft at once, maybe more. He exhaled smoke. Can your method handle that? Or does it just get us killed faster? Mike thought about South Boston, about the time 6 guys from Charlestown jumped him outside the Broadway station, about how standing still would have meant a hospital bed, but moving, attacking, forcing them to react instead of execute, had gotten him out with a black eye and a loose tooth. Sir, defensive tactics assume the enemy has a plan and we're trying to survive it, Mike said. Aggressive tactics force them to survive ours. Numbers don't matter if their plan falls apart. Whitmore studied him. You're asking me to let you attack 50 fighters with 2 guns. No, sir. I'm asking you to let me make 50 fighters think they're being attacked by someone who doesn't care if he dies. There's a difference. That's insane. Yes, sir, but it's also the only chance we have. Whitmore crushed out his cigarette, looked at the mission map, looked back at Mike. If this goes wrong, then we were dead anyway, sir. At least this way we die making them scared. All right, Donovan, do it your way. But if we survive this, you're buying the first round. Deal, sir. They shook hands. Neither one mentioned that the officers' club didn't serve enlisted men, or that the gesture was about something bigger than regulations. March 6, 1944. 0730 hours. Hell's Fury lifted off from Framlingham in the pre-dawn darkness, joining the stream of B-17S forming up over the English Channel. Mike climbed into the tail section, strapped in, checked his guns for the 11th time. Through the plexiglass, he watched England disappear beneath clouds, and the North Sea turn gray with morning light. At 10:15 hours, the P-51 escort peeled away at the German border. Captain Whitmore's voice came through the intercom, steady despite what everyone knew was coming. We're on our own, boys. Eyes open. Guns ready. Mike counted his ammunition. 2,500 rounds of linked .50 caliber. He'd need every one. At 10:43 hours, the waist gunner, Sergeant Tom Price, broke radio silence with 3 words. Oh my God. Mike swiveled the guns and saw hell forming up behind them. Not 12 fighters, not 20. 48 BF-109s and FW-190s, arranging themselves into a coordinated assault pattern that looked like a textbook illustration of how to annihilate a bomber formation. They were still 2,000 yards out, organizing, preparing to execute the kind of attack that turned B-17S into falling debris. Standard doctrine said, wait. Let them commit. Conserve ammunition for the moment when they entered effective range, and you could make every bullet count. Mike opened fire at 1,400 yards. The twin .50 calibers roared, sending tracers arcing across the sky in long, phosphorescent streams that shouldn't have hit anything, shouldn't have done anything except announce his position and waste ammunition. But they didn't need to hit. They needed to disrupt. The lead element, 6 BF-109s in tight formation, scattered. Not from damage, but from the psychological violation of a tail gunner who was supposed to be prey acting like a predator. Mike didn't stop. He tracked the formation, fired another burst. Then swiveled 15 degrees and put 30 rounds into a wingman at 1,100 yards. The FW-190 exploded. The formation it belonged to disintegrated. Mike kept firing. Targeted wingmen, ignored the lead aircraft, aimed for the psychological supports of every formation he could see. One fighter erupted in flames, another spun away trailing smoke, a third took hits to the canopy and peeled off, its pilot probably dead or dying. But more importantly, the coordinated assault fell apart. Fighters broke formation to evade fire that was supposed to be defensive, not aggressive. Timing collapsed. Attack vectors dissolved. What should have been a synchronized execution became chaos. The intercom exploded with voices. Tail's going crazy! He's hitting them at Jesus. That's got to be 1,000 yards. Another one down. Another. Mike didn't respond. But he was too busy calculating. 48 fighters. 12 dead or damaged in the first 90 seconds. 36 remaining but disorganized, scattered, their attack plan shattered by a tail gunner who decided that waiting was the same as dying. He fired again. Targeted a wingman. The BF-109 took hits and rolled inverted. Its leader panicked and dove away. 2 minutes into the engagement, Mike had destroyed 8 fighters and caused collision between 2 more when their evasive maneuvers intersected at 400 miles per hour. 3 minutes in, he was down to 380 rounds, and the enemy formation was in complete disarray. 4 minutes in, 12 German fighters were falling from the sky, and the remaining 36 were scattered across 10 miles of airspace. Their pilots no longer thinking about executing a bomber, but about surviving a gunner who fought like he was hunting them instead of defending himself. Then Mike's guns went silent, empty, completely dry. 2,500 rounds expended in 4 minutes of sustained fire that violated every conservation principle the Army Air Forces taught. Through the plexiglass, Mike saw 6 BF-109s regrouping at 1,800 yards, forming up for another attack. This time they'd succeed because he had nothing left to stop them with. But they didn't know that. Mike kept the guns moving, tracked the fighters with cold, mechanical precision, swiveled the barrels to follow their approach, made every motion deliberate, threatening, lethal. The lead BF-109 closed to 1,200 yards. Mike tracked him, kept the gun barrels pointed at his cockpit. The fighter pilot could see the twin .50 calibers, could see the tail gunner still locked onto him, could assume those guns still had ammunition, because what kind of maniac would bluff with empty weapons at 23,000 feet? At 900 yards, the lead fighter broke off. His wingmen followed. The entire formation, 6 fighters that could have torn Hell's Fury apart, turned away because they believed Mike's reputation more than they believed physics. Sergeant Price's voice crackled through the intercom. "Tail, you still got ammo?" "Negative," Mike said. Silence. Then Whitmore's voice, quiet with something between disbelief and awe. "They don't know that, do they?" "No, sir." "Keep tracking them." Mike did. For another 20 minutes, he moved his empty guns with the same mechanical precision he'd used when they were loaded. Every German fighter that approached saw the tail gunner still locked on, still ready, still willing to destroy them. None of them tested whether he could. Hell's Fury landed at Framlingham at 1340 hours. The ground crew counted 47 holes in the fuselage, none critical. 9 crewmen climbed out alive. 12 confirmed German fighters destroyed. An estimated 36 more scattered or damaged. 0 American casualties. The debriefing lasted 3 hours. Mike explained his tactics to intelligence officers who looked at him like he'd grown a second head. He showed them the math. 20 rounds of aggressive fire disrupted formation timing, saved the aircraft, kept the crew breathing. He explained the wingman theory, the psychological warfare of attacking instead of defending, the cost-benefit of ammunition expenditure versus survival. At 1800 hours, Major General Frederick Anderson, commander of 8th Bomber Command, arrived at Framlingham unannounced. He walked into the debriefing room where Mike was still answering questions and dismissed everyone except Whitmore. "Sergeant Donovan," Anderson said, "I've read your after-action report. I've read every report you've filed since March 2nd. I've talked to Captain Whitmore. I've talked to your previous instructors." He sat down across from Mike. "You're either the luckiest man in the 8th Air Force, or you've figured out something the rest of us missed." "I don't believe in luck, sir." "Neither do I." Anderson pulled out a notebook. "I want you to explain your tactics. All of them. Every detail. Then I want you to train every tail gunner in 8th Bomber Command." Mike blinked. "Sir, we're losing 30% of our bombers per mission. Tail gunner casualties are 38%. Your methods, your insane, regulation-violating, ammunition-wasting methods, got your crew home intact against odds that should have killed you 5 times over. Anderson leaned forward. I don't care if it's crazy. I care if it works. And clearly it works. You want me to teach aggression, sir? I want you to teach survival. There's a difference. 2 weeks later, Mike was reassigned to training command. He didn't fly combat missions anymore. Instead, he stood in front of classrooms full of terrified gunners and taught them that waiting was death, that action was survival. The 20 rounds spent disrupting an attack saved more lives than 200 rounds spent defending against one. They called it the Donovan doctrine: aggressive engagement at extreme range, wingman targeting, psychological disruption over defensive posture, initiative over reaction. By August 1944, tail gunner casualties dropped from 38% to 19%. Bomber losses decreased by 22%. An estimated 300 B-17S that would have been destroyed under old tactics made it home because their tail gunners learned to hunt instead of hide. 3,000 men lived because one kid from South Boston decided that the rules were wrong. Mike Donovan never flew another combat mission. He trained gunners through the end of the war, was discharged in November 1945, and went home to Boston. Worked construction. Married a girl named Catherine from Dorchester. Raised 3 kids. Built houses. Fixed pipes. Lived quietly. He died in 1998 at 76 years old. His funeral was small. Family, a few friends from the construction company, neighbors who knew him as the quiet guy who fixed their steps without asking for payment. The priest gave a standard eulogy about a good man who lived a good life. Nobody mentioned that his tactics were still being taught at Air Force gunnery schools. Nobody mentioned the estimated 3,000 lives saved by his doctrine. Nobody mentioned that his name appeared in classified tactical manuals from 4 different nations. His oldest son, Patrick, found the medals in a shoebox in the basement 3 weeks after the funeral. Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, and a handwritten letter from Major General Anderson dated April 1944. Your contribution to this war cannot be measured in confirmed kills or successful missions. It can only be measured in the men who came home because you taught them how to survive. Patrick called his siblings. They read the letter together, tried to reconcile the quiet construction worker they'd known with the man described in military commendations as single-handedly revolutionizing defensive aerial tactics. They couldn't. So they kept the medals, framed the letter, and tried to understand that some heroes don't need monuments. Some heroes just need someone to remember that they were there when it mattered. Mike Donovan taught 847 tail gunners between March 1944 and November 1945. Of those 847, 723 survived the war. Most of them went home to their own quiet lives. Construction workers, teachers, farmers, mechanics. Most of them never talked about what they'd done. But every single one of them remembered the sergeant from South Boston who taught them that survival wasn't about following rules. It was about breaking them at exactly the right moment. And waiting? Waiting just got you hurt. Action kept you breathing.